Hey, this is Naveed back here with another video for you. In this video, I'm going to talk about a shootout that I did with my Sony A7RIII and my Nikon D3300. I want to show you that you can still get great photos on a budget without spending a ton of money. Now this is the light that I used. It's the FJ400. You can see it right here. The softbox that I have on it is the Light Dome Mini, and on top of the light dome, I have the diffuser, the white sheet, and then on top of that, I have the eggshell crate. That just adds a little bit more contrast in the shadows. But not super important to have the eggshell, but having an off-camera light is really helpful, and just getting into strobe is very interesting. It's challenging, but definitely you want it to be in your tool belt. All right, so let's jump into Lightroom and let's see the photos that we got. So this first shot we have here is the Nikon D3300 with the 35mm f1.8. Now, clearly we're a little overexposed, but I did use off-camera flash to the best ability that I could, given the constraints. So one of the problems with the Nikon is that I really couldn't adjust the shutter speed to where I wanted to. Really, I was stuck at 1/200, which is fine. So I made sure to keep the shots at 1/200, f1.8, and ISO 100 for both the Nikon and the Sony. Okay, so this is before I did any edits. Now when I apply the edits, this is what I got. Now quickly I'll run through that. I just decreased the exposure, increased the contrast, and then just messed around with these dials here. And then the real effect where I get that yellow background is coming from the point curve. So if I start with the reds, I just did a minor adjustment here, the greens, some minor tweaks as well. But the big one is actually going to be in the blues, where I really pulled out the yellow. And you can just see the shape that I had here if you're trying to get something similar. Now as I go down, I just increased the temperature a little bit, and then I brought up the vibrance. That just keeps some of the integrity in the skin color versus adding a lot of saturation, okay? The next thing I did was I just increased the yellows. I brought down the oranges just to get his skin tones correct. And then everything else is just kind of messing around. I don't even think this purple is really doing a whole lot. It's really just the yellows, the oranges, and maybe some blues right here in the back. All right, now let's switch over to the Sony. Now this is the shot that I took with the Sony after the edits. This is before. So clearly I'm overexposed. The light was okay. It's hitting, as you can see, the light is pretty good hitting his face. It's just we're overexposed in the shot. Now the problem that I had with the Nikon is that I had some constraints. I was having issues shooting with low shutter speed. So I was pretty much stuck at 1/200, and I wasn't able to get anything else out of that DSLR. It could have just been me not knowing how to use that camera. But if we look at this shot right here, this is shooting with the Sony at 1/1000, ISO 100, f1.8. So clearly the subject is really popping out, and everything else seems to darken a little bit. All right, so that's one of the benefits that you get with the Sony system, and also just the dynamic range. The colors and the pigments are much clearer and nicer versus the Nikon. So if I look at this shot with the Nikon and then I look at the shot with the Sony, if I zoom in, the detail's pretty good. The focus is good. Because I had that 1/200 shutter speed, it was a little more challenging to get that focus locked in. Now, if I switch over to the Nikon, you don't see a huge difference. The big difference that you're seeing is in the coloring of the skin, the pigment of the skin. So just having more dynamic range, it really gives you better colors, that's for sure. But the point of this video is just to let you know that you can get great shots using inexpensive gear. This is not a bad shot. The other thing I want to point out is that I was using a 35mm for the Nikon, and clearly his head looks just a little bit wider than it does in this shot. In this shot, we get that nice narrow head, and it's really just the compression on the 85mm lens. If I used an 85mm with the Nikon, I'm sure that I would get some pretty good compression as well. So if you want to go for a more inexpensive 85mm lens for your Nikon versus the 85 1.8 Sony, you can also do that. Now this is the shot before, and clearly we're overexposed, and we can look at what I did on the edits. I basically copied the edits from this photo like this. I went to copy edit settings, and then I pasted them in here just to have a baseline, and then I tweaked some adjustments from there. So that's basically all I did. And yeah, the point is just to show you that you can still get great photos using something like a Nikon D3300. Now clearly this shot, I like it better, but it doesn't mean that you cannot work with this as you're getting started. Okay, now one of the last things that I want to do, I just want to bring this into Photoshop. I'm sure I could do this change in Lightroom, but I'm just more used to using this tool, so that's why I'm doing it here. But all I've done is basically added a levels adjustment, and then from there I did some tweaks. You can see what I did, but basically when I add that in, let me pull this down so you can see everything. So I just want to brighten up the photo a little bit more, and so with these tweaks I kind of just bring out the subject. So I'm not going to be doing anything crazy like dodging and burning or doing any blemish removal, but I just want to show you how you can just adjust the levels and then just make the image pop a little bit more. So again, here's before and then here's after. So these are really small tweaks, really small changes that I'm doing, but just making the overall image better. And again, this was shot with the Nikon D3300. And then with the Sony photo, I actually went all out, did a lot of adjustments, and I'll show you what that image looks like now. So in another video, I will walk you through my entire workflow, how I go through dodging and burning, skin smoothing, blemish removal, and really where I've got to as far as editing.